a heavier sort of topic and question for you. So, on occasion, a person who either has been divorced or is currently married to a person that has experienced divorce uh, is beginning the process with our system. And does having a divorce in your past disqualify a person from ministry with us?
No, not inherently. I mean, not automatically. I mean, the good news is the Church of Jesus Christ has a message of redemption. And the mandate of the church is to take the gospel into this world and say your life can be rebuilt, your life can be restored. But the church is filled with imperfect people. And so to the glory of God, there's a pathway for restoration. We firmly believe that as a Free Methodist Church. There are some organizations, churches or denominations that would say if a person has ever been divorced or if their spouse has ever been divorced, that person or that couple could never be in leadership in the church. But that is not the position of the Free Methodist Church.
Thanks. So, what is the divorce clearance process, and what does that look like for a candidate in our system?
Well, it's very intentional to talk about divorce, to talk about clearance, and talk about a process, because we do have a way in which we create a conversation with a person who's applying to become a conference ministerial candidate, or applying, if they're already a pastor, they're applying to enter our system. We create a conversation with them about understanding how well they understand the issues of their divorce and understanding the nature of their divorce in our system. The goal is to make sure that the pastor's past is in the past. So our process is, once we realize in our office, or sometimes it's a superintendent who first realizes that either a candidate or a potential pastor has been divorced or a spouse has been. As soon as we realize that, we look to identify the closest possible person to them in our organization who can go and begin to have a conversation saying, like in the Free Methodist Church, for you to move ahead to be a conference ministerial candidate or to become a pastor in a church, we work a process called divorce clearance. So we say that we want to have the closest possible person because we want this to be like a safe, in the field conversation, not a sense of an outside official coming from someplace in the hierarchy swooping in to do an investigation. That's not at all what we're about.
Yeah.
So does that kind of give you a bit of an overview?
Yeah, that's good, and it's great to hear that it's not a cold process coming in from the outside, interrogating a candidate about their divorce, but rather a conversation between somebody who's very close relationally with that candidate. So, in that conversation, what sorts of questions would that divorce advocate ask the potential candidate?
Well, they're very basic, open-ended questions. First of all, the advocate would say, just tell me the story. Like, when did this happen? What happened? A lot of times the interview is more like what happened, and then what happened next, and what did you do, and what did the other person do, and how did this turn out, and what took place. So it is very much to learn the story. But then there's also questions like, how has this impacted you? What have you learned in this process? What regrets or sadness do you still carry to this day about this? As you look back on this, is there anything you realize you needed to do differently? So we ask those kinds of questions. We also ask the question of, so how do you explain this if somebody learns your divorce? Like, what do you say about this to people? And also, could you just give us a little bit of an example of how you interpret it and apply in your ministry, where you give leadership? How do you interpret and apply the scriptures that are in the Bible about the topic of divorce? Like, what's your teaching about this? So that's kind of a spectrum of questions that we ask.
So after that interview takes place, I guess there's a two-part question. So what happens next? And then is the candidate going to have to revisit this process anytime they're appointed to a new church?
Well, I mean, those are both good questions. So let me take them one at a time. In terms of what happens next, the divorce clearance advocate will be not only somebody who's close, but somebody who's skilled. And, and the divorce clearance advocate may say to this individual or to the couple, here's some recommendations I have for you. I mean, if there's clear evidence of unhealed wounds, like there could be a recommendation for counseling. If there's evidence that, say, children who were caught in the crossfire of a divorce have been deeply damaged by this, there might be some recommendations to provide some assistance for the children. If there's any evidence that there's unresolved issues of where a person might need to make some amends, or might even have evidence of unconfessed sin, where they're very much defending things that they did that are very clearly not the biblical way to handle things. The advocate might say, let me just say this in a gentle way, but I think there's some things that you need to change, or there's some way in which you need to go back and make some amends. Would you be willing to do that? So those kinds of recommendations would be first and foremost brought to the person. But then there would be a report provided to the MEG board for that region that simply says, having completed the interview, here's my general impressions. The MEG board does not need all the details. That's part of the goal of having the divorce clearance advocate, is that there's a boundarying of information, that if there's personal and sensitive information that's shared, it doesn't get shared with an entire board. Like, one divorce clearance advocate can have an understanding and can give a summary and some impressions. And then the MEG board would also have the information as well. So a MEG board then has the option to affirm the person as cleared to minister in our organization, to affirm the recommendation saying, pending you addressing some of these issues, we think it's possible for you to move ahead with this. Or in cases where there's a very clear evidence of unaddressed sin and unrepentant attitude, our MEG board might say, we really don't have an open door for you to serve in our system. But here's the thing. The MEG board provides a covering that can help a person put the past in their past. So that if our MEG board clears somebody from ministry, then every time that person might go and minister in a different setting in the Free Methodist Network, they don't have to explain their story and satisfy the questions of different leadership teams or leaders, that type of thing. They can simply say that a team of godly leaders in the Acts 12:24 churches has looked in depth into the circumstances of my divorce and has determined that I'm cleared for ministry. And so that means you don't have to spend the rest of your life answering questions that you shouldn't have to keep answering.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks for the clarity, Al. And if you see in the MEG Board in Action Guide, you can get some more details and kind of a written version of that information. Or you can also find that at acts1224churches.com under the MEG system link. You'll find the MEG Board in Action Guide to begin that process of the divorce clearance.